For years, governments around the world have kept a tight lid on UFO crashes. What if there were encounters so extraordinary, so shocking, they were deemed too compromising for public knowledge? Brace yourselves as we delve into the declassified world of UFO crashes that were hidden from the public for years. What will we uncover? And what else remains shrouded in secrecy?
There are large sections of Antarctica that are completely off limits to the public. They're called the ASPA, Antarctic Specially Protected Areas. These are regions in Antarctica given special protection. The only people allowed to set foot there are scientists or military to make sure people don't mess with the ecosystems or disrupt the scientific research. But as we know, any top secret area is going to spark a lot of questions. So a lot of conspiracy theories about Antarctica stem from these protected areas. When people hear about no-fly zones or areas where only certain scientists can go, they start to wonder why. So are these restricted areas concealing more than your standard scientific research? Are there secret military bases involved in dangerous research, possibly even involving aliens? Since only a few are allowed in, it's easy for imaginations to conjure things up, but is there any evidence of disturbing stuff going on in the frozen tundra of Antarctica?
In the 1950s, Professor Charles Hapgood proposed a fabulous theory that hidden underneath the ice sheets is the lost city of Atlantis. If you know me, you know I absolutely love the ocean and the movie Atlantis, The Lost Empire, so I am all for this theory. Basically, and we have lots of videos on this, Antarctica used to be a subtropical landscape, and that's not just a theory, that's a fact. You can look it up. But what if that subtropical landscape just so happens to be the landscape of Atlantis, home to the incredibly intelligent and powerful Atlanteans? Furthermore, it is believed that prior to the entire city sinking into the ocean and being engulfed in ice, the Atlanteans migrated from Antarctica to Mexico to found Aztec and Mayan empires, and then to Egypt to create the Egyptian Empire as well. I mean, it would explain the similarities between the pyramids and hieroglyphics found in both locations. Something to think about. The presence of Atlanteans in Egypt, Mexico, and Antarctica might also explain the pyramids in Antarctica. Yeah. In 2016, 3 pyramids were discovered in Antarctica measuring up to 4,000 feet tall, meaning they are just about 10 times larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza located in Egypt, which previously held the record of largest pyramid in the world. While there are no records of ancient civilizations having existed in Antarctica, many people agree that that doesn't matter. Why? Well, because the entirety of Antarctica literally used to be a subtropical paradise, and now it's covered in 2,160 meters of ice. So I'm sorry, scientists, but you just might not be able to access the evidence because it's been buried under over 7,000 feet of ice for the past 34 million years. Of course, the other theory is that the aliens built the pyramid and then traveled to Mexico and Egypt to do the same thing there. 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, I guess. Either way, the existence of the Antarctic pyramids and the similarities they share with the pyramids found in the warmer regions of Egypt and Mexico are undeniable.
Operation Deep Freeze was a series of US Navy missions starting in 1955 to establish American research bases in Antarctica. The operation involved tons of military personnel, scientists, and staff, but during some of these missions there were a few reports from crew members and scientists about strange things they'd spot in the sky over Antarctica. Unusual lights or objects moving in ways that didn't match any known aircraft. These reports aren't nearly as well known as others that come to mind, and a lot of that has to do with, one, how remote Antarctica is. There just weren't mass amounts of people to corroborate the sightings, and two, the people who were there were government employees. So much of what they were doing wasn't allowed to be disclosed, even leaving UFOs out of the picture. One of the most famous UFO sightings over Antarctica happened in 1965, though. During a period of intense scientific research in the continent, researchers spotted something in the sky. It was near the Antarctic coast where a group of researchers had been working. They reported seeing an unusual object that didn't look like any known aircraft. According to the reports, the object was bright and metallic, moving in these sporadic, unpredictable patterns. It changed direction suddenly and moved at speeds that seemed far too fast for any technology that was known at the time. Now, at this same time, there were very few aircraft in the region, making this whole thing even stranger. On May 21st, 1953, there were a number of reports that a UFO crashed in the desert near Kingman, Arizona, and that the military had quickly swooped in to cover it up. Arthur Stansel, a mechanical engineer working for the Air Force at the time, claimed that he was part of a team that was rushed to the crash site to investigate and recover the debris. He described seeing a small disc-shaped craft partially buried in the ground. It was made of a shiny metallic material, and there were no visible seams or rivets, which made it look like it was molded from a single piece of metal. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and he also claimed to have seen the body of a creature being held in a tent next to the crashed aircraft, stating he saw, quote, the dead body of a 4-foot human-like creature in a silver metallic suit. The skin on its face was dark brown. And of course, this was all covered up, with the material being loaded onto trucks and transported to an undisclosed location.
I have to say, I love a good whistleblower moment, especially when the whistleblowing is being done by military veterans in open court, and it's regarding the evidence of little green men. What a time to be alive. In July of 2023, 3 military veterans testified in a Congress hearing about UFOs and claimed that the United States government had been operating a secret UFO reverse engineering program for at least the past few decades. Claims were also made that the United States did in fact recover non-human biologics from certain alleged crash sites. Of course, the veterans were unable to go into extensive detail about the missions and operations that led to the discoveries and projects involving UFOs because they are obviously classified. But the simple act of the 3 men, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, David Grush, retired Air Force Major, and David Fravor, retired Navy Commander, openly admitting to the existence of both UFOs, alien life forms, and secret government programs regarding the two in open court, it's pretty huge.
On November 9th of 1974 in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, 3 teenage boys reported seeing a glowing object streaking across the sky before crashing into a nearby pond. They described the object as round and emitting a strange light, which continued to glow even after it hit the water. People started showing up at the scene, gawking at this mysterious object in the pond, and as word spread, more and more people gathered, and soon local police and fire departments arrived on scene. Witnesses claimed they saw them retrieve a small metallic object, which was then covered and taken away on a truck. Official explanations later claimed that this object was just a railroad lantern that had been thrown into the pond, but some weren't so convinced, and even today people still wonder if something more mysterious had actually plummeted into the water that night.
Prior to 1967, Shag Harbor, located at the southern tip of Nova Scotia, Canada, was a pretty understated fishing village. And then a UFO came to town. On October 4th, around 11:20 p.m., residents of Shag Harbor watched as a mysterious object descended from the sky and crash landed on the water. Witnesses claimed that the craft had 3 to 4 glowing orange lights and that it was about 60 feet in length. After landing in the water, the lights began to dim until eventually all that was left was a yellowish foam, indicating that the craft had either moved too distant to be seen or that it had sunken into the icy waters of Shag Harbor. Authorities searched the area until about 3 a.m., but nothing was ever found, nor has it been to this day. Although it was confirmed that the object was not a civilian or military aircraft, all of those had been accounted for. The day after the incident, the Rescue Coordination Center filed a report with Canadian Forces headquarters claiming that something had in fact touched down in the waters of Shag Harbor and that it was of unknown origin. As I said, to this day, the object has yet to be recovered. Maybe we'll get lucky this year.
On April 18, 1962, people across multiple states witnessed something flying through the sky, which eventually crashed near the Nellis Air Force Base outside Las Vegas. The object was tracked by NORAD, which made its way across 10 US states. The object was described as a bright red or blue fireball. It was first seen on the East Coast just outside of Syracuse. Things got even stranger when the object apparently landed at one point. An Air Force spokesman said the object was on the ground for about 42 minutes and that during this time a nearby power station mysteriously lost all power. As soon as the object took off again, the power was restored. The Air Force sent out jets which pursued it across the country. Then over the Mesquite Range in Nevada, the UFO exploded in a brilliant glare that was so bright it was visible over 5 states. What makes this case so incredible is the number of witnesses. Having crashed from the east coast to the west coast, the UFO was seen by thousands of people. But was it just a meteor, or was it something else? That whole part about it landing and then cutting off power, that's very strange. That has not been explained.
The FBI has done their best to keep the public from learning too much about extraterrestrial spacecrafts on Earth, but eyewitness reports, military veteran testimonies, photographs, and video footage has made their dream of keeping the public in the dark nothing more than a fantasy.
Here's what the FBI doesn't want you to know, but what we're gonna tell you anyways.
Now, if you know anything about UFOs, you know about the Roswell incident that took place on a farm in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947. But if you don't, here's the quick notes. In 1947, a UFO crash landed on Mac Brazel's farm. He didn't think much of it until UFO reports started coming out in the local newspaper. Brazel notified local authorities, the Air Force got involved, the crashed object was taken to Area 51, and the whole thing was written off as a crashed weather balloon, despite Brazel and military personnel claiming otherwise. Well, did you know that from 1947 to 2018, the crash site was a designated no-go zone? That's right, the entire area was closed off to the public for an entire 71 years, likely so the government could cover all their bases and ensuring that the public would never know the true nature of the crash. In 2018, the site was finally reopened to the public, but unfortunately, at this point, all evidence of what was most definitely an alien spaceship — you don't close off an area for 71 years because of a crashed weather balloon — is now long gone.
The Kecksburg UFO case has to be one of the strangest UFO cases in history. On December 9th, 1965, people in 6 US states, as well as parts of Canada, reported spotting a fireball streak across the sky over Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario. Then folks in the small village of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, claimed to see something crash into the woods after seeing wisps of blue smoke and feeling vibrations. Authorities cordoned off the area and searched the forest, later claiming to find nothing and saying the object was likely just a meteor. But that didn't line up with what a number of witnesses had seen. People who did manage to get close to the crash site described seeing a large acorn-shaped object partially buried in the ground. It was about the size of a small car and had strange markings that almost looked like hieroglyphics. But they didn't get a very long look before the military stepped in. So what exactly was this object? Was it a Soviet satellite? A piece of top-secret military equipment? Was it not from Earth at all? This case is nowhere near as famous as something like Roswell, but it has come up on shows like Unsolved Mysteries, and UFO investigators still reference it to this day. But the truth as to what really crashed into the forest is still undisclosed.
Since the Roswell incident, New Mexico has been a hot spot for UFO sightings. UFO crashes, however, are far less common, but they still do happen, no matter how much the FBI and the Pentagon wants us to think they don't. Luckily, free speech is still more or less a thing. Or we probably never would have heard of the March 25th, 1948 UFO crash at Hart Canyon Hiking Trail, in which a spacecraft of unknown origins crashed into the mesa and was promptly recovered and covered up by the United States Air Force and 5th Army Division. According to a plaque located at the site, the recovery operation took a total of 2 weeks to complete, and all materials taken from the site were brought to the Los Alamos Laboratory for scientific study and evaluation. According to eyewitness reports, the spacecraft was approximately 100 feet in diameter and 18 feet tall. And according to insiders, it had been transporting as many as 16 extraterrestrials who, unfortunately, all died on impact.
In the spring of 1941, 6 years before the infamous Roswell incident, something crashed just outside Cape Girardeau, Missouri. A local Reverend William Huffman had been called to perform last rites at the site, and when he arrived, he was shocked to see a strange metallic saucer-shaped object. Around it were small bodies, and the bodies didn't look human. He claimed the bodies were about 4 feet tall, with large heads and eyes and thin limbs. The military quickly took control, removing the wreckage and the bodies, and the incident was hushed up. The story remained mostly a family secret until years later, when Huffman's granddaughter, Charlotte Mann, recounted what her grandmother had told her. According to Mann, her grandfather also saw strange hieroglyphic-like symbols inside of this craft, similar to those described in other UFO crash stories. No official documents confirming the crash have ever been released, but some say this is just another example of a successful government cover-up.
While Ohio's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is not believed to be a secret crash site, many people do claim that it is a place where crashed UFOs are taken to be studied and reverse engineered. Specifically in Hangar 18, the legendary alien warehouse located on the base, where many UFO enthusiasts believe the government hides flying saucer debris, the remains of extraterrestrials, and even live aliens. Speculation of the base began after the Roswell incident in 1947, and it has continued to this day, with many people claiming that reliable sources have confirmed its existence, i.e. former military personnel. One such man was a military pilot named Oliver Henderson, who allegedly told his wife that while working for the base he was required to fly a plane filled with UFO debris and several small alien bodies from Roswell to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Another former pilot, Marion Black Mac McGruger, claimed that scientists at the base conducted experiments on a live extraterrestrial being and ended up killing it. Many other experiments are said to have been carried out at the base as well, although according to the FBI, the Pentagon, and the government, it's just a regular Air Force base where everything is completely above board. Alright, buckle up, because for this next one we've got the rhymes with Yahtzees, aliens, and nuclear weapons. That's right, there is a theory that states that Antarctica is actually a secret, oppressive Germany circa World War II military base dedicated to housing advanced technologies and massive nuclear weapons that could quite literally eradicate all of us in a matter of minutes, if whoever is currently running the base decided to set them all off at once. To make matters worse, a recent evidence shows that a secret military base close to the North Pole, located in northwest Greenland, might be used for the same thing. So, if whoever they are wanted, they could probably take out the whole planet. Not comforting. Now, some people take the whole thing a step further by bringing aliens into the mix, saying that the advanced technologies are actually out of this world technologies brought to Earth by our extraterrestrial alien friends. Now, if we have extraterrestrial allies, who's to say we don't have otherworldly adversaries as well? Maybe the advanced tech is to protect us rather than destroy us. One can only hope.
For decades, there have been rumors that the Third Reich also set up a secret base in Antarctica during World War II. The Third Reich were known for their interest in mysticism and the occult, always on the hunt for ancient artifacts they believed had special powers to help them conquer the world, and some people think they might have been searching for something hidden deep in the frozen tundra of Antarctica. Either that, or they were experimenting with advanced high-tech weapons, Antarctica being perfect given how remote it is. Some even think these secret research projects carried on after the war ended, and after the Second World War, in 1946 and 47, the US did send a large naval fleet to Antarctica in an operation called Operation High Jump. The official reason was to train personnel and test equipment, but some conspiracy theorists believe the real mission was to find and destroy this alleged German base, to take out the remnants of their forces and their secret projects for good. Or maybe they were shown up to take over the research for themselves.
Take a look at this 130-foot tall, nearly perfect rectangular iceberg. Does it look natural to you? Yeah, me neither. There are a ton of these strangely geometric icebergs scattered throughout Antarctica. Why? Well, the scientific explanation is that they naturally formed after part of an iceberg broke off of a much larger iceberg, which is cool and all, but not nearly as interesting as the leading conspiracy theory. You see, many people believe that the icebergs were carved by aliens thousands of years ago as some kind of launching pad or secret base. Scientists say that's ridiculous because not every corner of the iceberg is perfect, only some. I mean, duh, they were carved thousands of years ago. Ever heard of erosion? Next thing you know, they're gonna start saying that the pyramids weren't created by ancient Egyptians, but after a rock broke off a bigger rock because the top isn't perfectly pointy. Nice try, scientists. Perhaps the government shares the secret underground base with the aliens, and that is why they are so keen on keeping us out and taking every possible precaution to make sure we don't find out the truth about what really goes on in the Great White South.
Now, moving outside of the conspiratorial and theoretical realm for a moment, let's talk about a very real and very mysterious lake in Antarctica, Lake Vostok, the largest known subglacial lake in the continent. The lake is buried beneath more than 2 miles of ice, so what makes this place extra special? Well, it's been sealed off from the world for about 15 million years. That means whatever's swimming around down there has been doing its thing in total isolation for longer than humans have been around. The lake is pretty much one big prehistoric time capsule. It was completely untouched by the outside world for millions of years, but scientists have started attempting to explore it. It's not easy though. They gotta set up camp in one of the coldest places on Earth and then drill through ice thicker than your average skyscraper is tall, while trying not to contaminate the water down below. But in 2012, scientists did confirm they found living organisms in the lake, microbes living in a place where no one expected life to thrive. So, who knows what else could be lurking even deeper down? Speaking of deeper down, here's Hannah.
Is Antarctica actually the entrance to center Earth? Well, maybe. It's a story as old as time, or, well, a story as old as the conspiracy theory at least. There are, believe it or not, a group of people who believe that an asteroid that crashed into Antarctica millions of years ago caused a crack in the Earth that revealed a secret utopia. In 2006, scientists working in Antarctica discovered a crater deep underneath the permafrost, and of course, they believe the crater had been formed by an asteroid. But conspiracy theorists believe that scientists aren't telling the whole truth. They say that the crater actually cracked right through the top layer of Earth to reveal that tropical paradise that is now the go-to vacation hotspot for the world's global elites, presidents, celebrities, and perhaps aliens too. There are also theories out there that say that the asteroid really did just create a crater, but that crater is where the soldiers from World War II Germany set up camp. Alongside the aliens, of course.
What are these figurines supposed to be? Would you ever think that they were meant to depict humans? Certainly don't look human to me, but it's not just because they're very old sculptures. I mean, they look intentionally not human. They look reptilian. The noses, or lack thereof, the eyes, if these were meant to resemble people, they did a bad job. Either that or these were really horrifying looking folks. But if they're not meant to be humans, then what exactly are they? The statues are often referred to as the Ubaid lizard men. The 7,000-year-old artifacts were uncovered in Iraq in the 20th century. There are theories as to what these things could be, but no definitive evidence. Unfortunately, we don't have any written records of the time, so determining the ideas behind people's artistic expression in prehistoric Mesopotamia, it's not really the easiest, but I'm pretty fascinated by the idea that there may have been some reptilian aliens visiting Earth around this time that people were depicting here.
Definitive proof of life beyond our planet found inside of a meteorite that landed in Sri Lanka back in December of 2013. Yeah. When pieces of the space rock were gathered and examined back in 2013, a shocking discovery was made. The debris of the meteor contained fossils, algae fossils, of clear extraterrestrial origin, according to lead scientist Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe. Because algae is technically alive, if Professor Chandra's science is correct, the discovery marks the first documented discovery of life that originated from outside of our atmosphere. While the legitimacy of the work has been debated amongst Chandra's peers, who claim that the algae may have been embedded into the meteorite during its time on Earth, the professor is standing firm in his discovery and has claimed that among the algae fossils he discovered were other organisms that are not yet identified and do not match anything discovered on Earth thus far, which of course is great news for those of us who are really hoping that Chandra's discovery of extraterrestrial life is legitimate and that the doubters are just mad they weren't able to make the discovery for themselves.
Are these sculptures of planes? They kind of look like stylized planes to me, but that would be impossible because these are thousands of years old. They're artifacts from what is known as the Kumbaya period, a pre-Columbian culture which was around from about 500 BC to 680. They were known for their skill in metalwork. I mean, obviously these things are lovely, but yeah, they really do look remarkably like modern airplanes. They have wings that don't really look like bird wings wings to me, and a lot of them even have what look like tail fins. So how and why were these created? Did these people somehow have knowledge of what the future of air travel was going to look like? Were they encountering beings with highly advanced technology? The official explanation is that these are depictions of animals, insects, birds, that sort of thing, and yeah, there's a very good chance that's all these are, but I can't deny how eerily accurate they look to modern flying machines. And here's another really interesting thing. In 1994, a group of German engineers actually built scale models of the Kambaya artifacts to see if they could fly, and guess what? They did, with an added propulsion system of course, but the designs worked. They were aerodynamically perfect and could fly.
The Williams Enigmatic. What is it? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely from out of this world. It looks a bit like a rock with a plug, but it's not a rock with a plug, and it's far from being just an ordinary rock. The object was found in 1998 by a hiker named John J. Williams. He noticed a strange piece of metal coming out of the dirt on his hiking trail, and so he dug it up. When he did, he revealed a rock with 3 metal prongs sticking out of it. It looked somehow man-made and appeared to have some kind of electrical component to it. Why? Well, I'm not sure, but Williams, who is an electrical engineer, claims that the electronic component embedded in the stone was not glued or welded into the granite rock surrounding it, meaning that while it appears to have possibly been man-made, because electrical components don't just naturally exist inside of rocks, especially ones dated to be around 100,000 years old, it must be something else, perhaps from somewhere else, perhaps somewhere out of this world. While Williams is open to having others research the strange rock, he does have a few conditions. He must be present for whatever discovery is made, and the rock must remain unharmed. Even with these parameters, you would think that by using modern day tools and technology, we would have been able to get an answer as to what exactly the rock is by now, and where the electrical component is coming from and how it was embedded. But no such discovery has been made, leaving the leading theory to be that its origins are likely not of this earth, and that it likely holds the answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet.
No one is exactly sure what this thing is. It's been dubbed the Wedge of Aiud and was found in Romania in 1973. Workers came across it while digging during a construction project. It was found buried along with 2 large mastodon bones. The wedge is around 5 pounds and it's made of aluminum. Now this turns out to be pretty strange because aluminum wasn't widely used until the 19th century, but this thing is estimated to be much older, at least 250,000 years old. It's a very odd looking object, looks like a modern art piece or something, but what exactly is it? Well, again, nobody really knows for sure, but one of the funnest theories, of course, is that it's extraterrestrial in origin, maybe having come off an ancient alien spacecraft or something.
Of course, a regular mission to space is no walk in the park, but a mission to a faraway planet located in a star system entirely separate from our own, that's tough. And apparently so was the training process. It took an entire year of survival, escape, evasions, weapons, and psychological training for the 12 astronauts to become fully prepared for their mission. The crew consisted of scientists, linguists, pilots, 2 doctors, and a security officer. Over the course of a year, along with the standard training, one by one, each member of the crew was buried in a 6 by 5 foot box and kept there for 5 days as part of a training intensive. There was no light, no communication. Just a small air hole that allowed the astronauts to receive food and water and not suffocate to death. It was tough, but they all passed, and the pilots even went on to learn how to operate alien spacecrafts. When it came time to take off, the 12 astronauts, along with 40 tons of gear, which included 10 motorcycles and 3 jeeps, were loaded into the spacecraft using anti-gravity technology, and one even came along to assist in their journey. When the ship was all boarded, each astronaut went to their own individual pod and settled in for the long journey ahead.
Alright, before we get to, what they saw on that journey, let's have a little bit of fun here and talk about something that comes up more than you'd probably think when Project Serpo or just interactions between aliens and humans is discussed. Hybrids. Yeah, aliens creating human-alien hybrids, either through experimentation or, God forbid, actually getting it on. This kind of thing always feels like it's going down the same rabbit hole that creepy online fan fiction does. novels, where it's like, I'm gonna write about my fantasy of Alf impregnating Willie Tanner. I don't know. I'm not trying to shame, live your lives, but the concept of humans and aliens breeding with each other always feels inherently silly to me. With that said though, this does often play into the Project Serpo conspiracy. Those astronauts were apparently on this planet for a while. Who knows who they met? One thing could have led to another. Plus, in all these reported UFO abduction cases, who knows what kind of nasty experiments those Greys could have been doing.
When the crew arrived at Serpo, the first thing they noticed was that it was barren, bright, and hot. Really hot. About 107 degrees Fahrenheit or 41 degrees Celsius. Quickly, they realized why. Planet Serpo had two suns, which are shown here in a photograph taken by one of the astronauts, allegedly. One of the suns was orbited by Serpo, and the other was off in the distance. Because of this, the planet never got dark, and the days were 40 hours long, meaning that their decade-long mission was actually going to take 13 human years. In total, there are about 650,000 EBEs living on the planet in small, separate village communities and houses made of some kind of concrete rubber substance. It was a primitive life, but at the same time, the EBEs were equipped with electricity and incredibly advanced technology. Families generally consisted of a male and female EBE, and each family was allowed to have a maximum of 2 children, which were hidden away until they reached the age of maturity. During their time on Serpo, the astronauts gathered as much information about the EBEs as they could. And if you guys remember, I do believe I mentioned that one of the astronauts died on transit. Apparently the EBEs used that astronaut to clone and create hybrids of, like James mentioned. And it was then that the remaining astronauts realized that they weren't as peaceful as they once thought them to be. When it came time to return home, for some reason, 2 of the astronauts actually decided to stay, and then 2 more astronauts died on the way back to Earth. The surviving astronauts were given a large sum of money and an entirely new identity. That's great and all, but many of them were suffering from radiation poisoning due to the 2 suns and died soon after their return to Earth.
One of the most avid supporters of the Project Serpo conspiracy is a man named Richard Doty, who we can't really talk about Serpo without talking about this guy. See, Richard Doty has made some pretty outlandish claims, so outlandish that there's a whole other conspiracy that spawned around him and other government officials like him. Supposedly, Doty was the man behind those anonymous emails I talked about earlier. Richard Doty is a retired special agent who used to work for AFOSI, the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation. But a lot of people think he wasn't actually investigating UFOs, but that he was part of a team spreading misinformation intentionally, basically muddying the waters and leaking supposedly secret info about the government's exchange program with alien beings in order to confuse the public, making it hard for us to tell what's real or not. Of course, the purpose behind the misinformation is, of course, to distract everyone from the actual nefarious things the government is up to. I mean, who doesn't get excited about aliens, right? I'm sure we'd all rather believe that the worst thing the government is doing is working with extraterrestrials instead of them doing some shady stuff at our own expense. Could there be some genuine truth about the Planet Serpo thing? I mean, sure, maybe, but you know, just something to keep in mind with stuff like this.
A top secret exchange program between the United States government and Planet Serpo, located in the Zeta Reticuli star system, aka the planet of the short Greys. The project was allegedly created under the administration of President John F. Kennedy after the US government saved the life of an alien, EBE-1, who crash landed on Earth back in 1947. Entirely grateful and forever indebted to humanity, the alien began working with the US government and teaching them about his home planet, Serpo. When EBE-1 died, he left behind communications technology, which the government then used to eventually get into contact with other Serpo natives. That is when the government made arrangements to send 12 specially trained astronauts to Planet Serpo so that they may learn about life outside of our atmosphere. In order to reach Serpo, the 12 astronauts had to travel through a wormhole, after which the majority of them got sick and one unfortunately died of an aneurysm. But of course they kept going and eventually they reached the alien planet. For a decade they studied life on Serpo before returning home and assuming entirely new identities in order to protect the security of the mission. Fair enough, I suppose.
So what are the origins of this Project Serpo tale? Well, like with most conspiracies in the modern age, it started gaining popularity online and took off from there. It all started in 2005 when a series of anonymous emails began circulating among UFO researchers and enthusiasts. These emails, which were allegedly from a retired US government official who remained anonymous, laid out this insane story about an extraterrestrial exchange program. We'll talk more about this anonymous individual later. The Project Serpo story started making the rounds way faster than these types of stories would have back in the day. It was 2005, the internet was still relatively new in the grand scheme of things anyway, and the UFO community was just hungry for new sensational stories. And this one, it's pretty much the definition of sensational.
Remember that alien that I mentioned, EBE-1, that crash landed to Earth in 1947? Yeah, well, that was actually the Roswell incident of 1947, and also the first time the US government supposedly made contact with aliens. As many of you are probably already aware, in 1947 an unidentified object crash landed on some farmland in Roswell, New Mexico. When Area 51 was alerted of the incident, they rushed to the scene, collected the object, and released a statement saying that what had come spiraling down to Earth a few nights prior was nothing more than a weather balloon. But then they sent the object out to another base for testing, and another, and another. Why? Well, because it wasn't actually a weather balloon. It was an alien spacecraft containing 6 aliens, 5 of which had died in the crash, and 1 of which came to be known as Extraterrestrial Biological Entity Number 1, or EBE-1. EBE-1 was taken to the Air Force facility in Los Alamos, where he stayed until his death in 1952. During this time, he learned to communicate with the military and told them some pretty interesting things.
Now, if the US government is really working with these alien beings, where might they be carrying out their activities? Area 51? Some hidden base in Antarctica? Well, some say they could be operating from an even more top secret place, Dulce Base. Dulce Base supposedly sits deep beneath the Colorado-New Mexico border, close to Dulce, New Mexico. Dulce Base is said to be a secret facility where humans and aliens are working together, exchanging ideas and doing all sorts of experiments, multiple levels deep underground with high-tech labs. The rumors are that different alien species, from the Greys, from planet Serpo possibly, to the reptilians, are working hand in hand with the US government. As to what they're trying to accomplish, probably something really fun and good that we don't really need to bother worrying about. Stories about this place really started coming about from a man named Paul Benowitz, who claimed to have discovered an underground base near Dulce, full of gray aliens and humans. His claims caught a lot of attention, but Benowitz's mental health eventually declined, and he ended up in a mental hospital, passed away in 2003. There's always been this rumor that he was part of a big, widespread misinformation campaign.
As I said, during EBE-1's time on Earth, he informed the US government of quite a few things. One being that Serpo natives, Ebens as they are referred to by humans, had actually been visiting Earth for the last 2,000 years with no issue, but unfortunately, this time new Earth radar technology that they don't have on Serpo caused the ship to go haywire and crash, killing the majority of the crew. In 1949, a similar thing happened. 6 Ebens crash landed, but this time unfortunately none of them made it. When the ship was examined, the military found a communications device, which they worked on with EBE-1 to repair. They got it working and sent out multiple distress signals, but it wasn't until after EBE-1's death in 1952 that they finally got a reply. Communications began between the US military and the Ebens. It took a while, but eventually they were able to understand one another. After learning about the 12 deceased Ebens stranded on Earth, the Ebens asked if they could come to Earth and retrieve the bodies. Of course, the military wanted something in return, so they came up with the exchange program. The military wanted tech, but the Ebens said, no, you're not ready for our tech. And so they proposed something else. In exchange for the bodies of their deceased, 12 astronauts could spend a decade on planet Serpo. Furthermore, an Eben would stay on Earth to assist the military. In 1964, the Ebens landed on Earth once again to retrieve the bodies, and Project Serpo, aka Project Crystal Night, as it has also been called, commenced.
The star system where these aliens are supposedly from has been at the center of some of the most famous alien abduction stories in history, including the Barney and Betty Hill abduction. Were these beings from Serpo? Ebens, or Greys as they're typically called, responsible for abductions like this? The Barney and Betty Hill case is pretty interesting. In September of 1961, this American couple was driving through rural New Hampshire at night when they noticed strange lights in the sky that seemed to be tracking their car's movements. Barney decided to stop the car to get out and have a look, and what he allegedly saw were humanoid figures peering out from a hovering craft. The Hills peeled off as fast as they could, but they later realized they'd lost a pretty hefty chunk of time that they just didn't remember. But as the days passed, they started to remember things. They ended up reporting being taken aboard a UFO where they were subjected to medical examinations by beings described as small, with gray skin, oversized eyes, and tiny little anime mouths, that's the exact way they described it back then. It's a 60s term, anime mouths. Their account was one of the earliest descriptions of the now iconic image of your classic gray alien.
The Sumerian Triumph tapestry, which appears to not only depict the succession of various rulers to the throne, but also the presence of UFOs hovering above the Sumerian people, is next on our list today. The tapestry was created in the capital of West Flanders province in the Flemish region of Belgium around 1538, and since then it has been the subject of many conspiracy theories, which makes sense considering the two alien spaceship-looking objects depicted in the top left corner of the piece. Now, if you know anything about the Sumerian people or the Anunnaki, you are likely well aware that even without the presence of the Triumph tapestry, the Sumerians are a pretty good argument for the legitimacy of aliens having had a pretty prominent presence on Earth in the past. Adding the tapestry into the mix is really just the cherry on top of the extraterrestrial cake, because it confirms how the Anunnaki, the ultra-intelligent alien species that ordered the creation of the pyramids, arrived on Earth in the first place. If you don't know anything about the Sumerians, ancient Sumeria, and the Anunnaki, but would like to, I do have a video on them titled Ancient Sumerian Mysteries That May Never Be Explained that you can watch after this.
Next, we have the Coso artifact, known as one of the world's out-of-place artifacts. It was discovered in 1961 near Olancha, California. While out looking for geodes, these rock collectors found a strange rock that seemed out of place, and when they cut it open, they were surprised to find it actually had a metal core inside. The outer layer of the rock was encrusted with a hard substance, while the inner metal core was a cylindrical object that looked almost like a spark plug. This was not what anyone had been expecting to find, because the rock seemed to be millions of years old, far older than the age of modern machinery. So it sparked, see what I did there? It sparked a lot of curiosity. Some researchers think this is just a naturally occurring geode that somehow formed around a modern spark plug, but what if it's not the case? What if it's a piece of ancient technology left by an advanced civilization, or even more interesting, an object that some extraterrestrial beings left behind a long time ago?
I'm sure by now we've all heard the theories that the pyramids were built by aliens, which is a fair assumption considering the fact that historians have been consistently unable to come up with an explanation as to how the construction of the pyramids would have been possible in ancient times. But what about other massive artifacts like Stonehenge, or perhaps the massive stone head that was found in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle in the 1930s? The statue dates back to before the Spanish Revolution, so prior to the Mayan and Aztec empires falling to the Spanish armies, which is strange considering 1, there is little to no way the Mayans living in the area could have sculpted the stone head and placed it in the area, and 2, if somehow they did, why doesn't it look like them? The statue's features do not mimic those of the ancient Mayans or Aztecs. Because of this, it is believed that the features once displayed on the head, which have since worn down due to revolutionary troops using the historic artifact as target practice, were actually the features of an ancient alien civilization that was far more intelligent than humanity, and that likely had a hand in the construction of the Mayan and perhaps even the Aztec empires as well.
This next one is actually 100% known to be from space. Back in June of last year, Harvard professor and theoretical astrophysicist Avi Loeb led an excavation to Papua New Guinea to uncover the remnants of a meteor that had crashed into the Pacific Ocean, and what they found were small spherical space rocks from deep in space, and there's still a question as to whether the object they came from was naturally occurring or not. What they do know is that the small spheres are made up of elements we don't have here on Earth. Loeb wrote, quote, "This is a historic discovery because it represents the first time that humans put their hands on materials from a large object that arrived to Earth from outside the solar system."
Finally, we have an incredibly mysterious extraterrestrial object discovered by the Betts family in 1974. That year, a mysterious fire had broken out on the family's property that destroyed 88 acres of woodland. When the Bettses went out to explore the area and search for the cause of the mysterious fire, they stumbled across a metal sphere with a diameter of just 8 inches and a weight of almost 20 pounds. At first, the family thought that the object might have belonged to the Soviet Union or perhaps NASA. They thought about leaving it where they found it, but curiosity got the better of them, and so they decided to take it home. About 2 weeks later, the family's son was playing guitar while sitting next to the strange spherical object when all of a sudden it began to emit a strange resonating sound that caused the family dog to act up. A while later, the family discovered that when they pushed the sphere across the floor away from themselves, it would change direction and return to the person who had pushed it. Not only that, but the object avoided being damaged at all costs, rolling up slanted tables to keep itself from crashing on the floor, and eventually it began emitting pulsing sounds seemingly out of nowhere. The strange behavior was witnessed by scientists as well as representatives from the military, so you don't just have to take the Betts family's word for it. At first, the Betts family refused to let the ball out of their possession, but after doors started slamming shut and music began randomly playing in their home, they handed it over to the authorities, who were shocked to discover that the metal ball was just that, a metal ball, or so it appeared. While there is no solid explanation as to why the sphere displayed such strange properties and caused so many strange things to happen, I think we can all agree that the most likely reason is because it came from outer space with a purpose that has yet to reveal itself to mankind.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the 1976 Tehran incident. The 1976 Tehran UFO incident is a notable case in ufology that took place on September 19, 1976. The incident involved a luminous object that was observed hovering over the city by two F-4 Phantom II jet interceptors of the Iranian Air Force. The object was detected on radar and appeared to be capable of jamming the communication systems of the jets. The pilots reported that they saw a brightly lit diamond-shaped object that emitted a green light, and they attempted to engage it with missiles. However, the object evaded their attempts and quickly disappeared. At a pilots' conference in 2007, one of the pilots in this incident, Parvez Jafari, said he attempted to fire at the UFO, but something strange was preventing him from doing so. He said, quote, "My weapons jammed and my radio communications garbled." The incident was investigated by the Iranian government and the US Defense Intelligence Agency, and it has been the subject of much speculation and debate among UFO enthusiasts. Some argue that the incident was evidence of extraterrestrial activity, while others suggest it may have been a secret military experiment or some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. Despite the official investigation, the incident remains unresolved and its true nature remains a mystery. In our number 9 spot today we have the McMinnville UFO photographs. The McMinnville UFO photographs are a series of 2 photographs taken by Paul and Evelyn Trent on May 11, 1950 in McMinnville, Oregon. The photos depict a metallic disc-shaped object in the sky with trees and buildings visible in the foreground. The Trents claimed that they saw the object hovering in the sky and were able to capture it on camera. The photographs quickly gained widespread attention and were widely circulated in newspapers and magazines, and they were also examined by several experts, including the US Air Force, which conducted an investigation known as Project Blue Book. Famous project here on Most Amazing Top 10. The Trents maintained that the photographs were genuine and that they had not tampered with them in any way. However, some skeptics have suggested that the photographs may have been hoaxed or that the objects in the photographs were just a common object. Despite the controversy surrounding the photographs, however, they remain one of the most famous and well-known UFO sightings in history. The photographs have been the subject of numerous articles, books, and documentaries, and have inspired countless discussions and debates about the existence of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. In our number 8 spot today, we have the USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO incident. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this, the crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at about 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate went over in 2 fighter jets, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, the white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it. Like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. And when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. So, faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what it was, but it certainly was beyond our current capabilities. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Aguadilla Airport incident. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident occurred on April 25th, 2013, when a strange object was spotted hovering above the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. The object was initially detected by radar and later confirmed by security cameras as a glowing, unidentified object that appeared to be traveling at a low altitude. The object was described as being around 4 to 5 feet in length, and it moved very quickly and very erratically. It was also observed to emit a bright white light and appeared to be changing shape. The incident attracted widespread attention and was investigated by several government agencies, including the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Homeland Security. The object was ultimately classified as an unidentified flying object, or UFO, and no explanation was given for its presence in the area. It is even said that a US Customs and Border Protection aircraft actually captured infrared video of the incident that was given to the Scientific Coalition for UFOlogy by a whistleblower. This video is said to show the UFO traveling at super low altitudes, sometimes lower than the treetops, but at speeds close to 100 miles per hour. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident is considered one of the most significant UFO sightings in recent history due to the high level of documentation and the involvement of government agencies. It continues to be a topic of discussion and speculation among UFO enthusiasts and researchers, and has contributed to ongoing efforts to uncover the truth about the nature and origin of UFO sightings around the world. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Project Blue Book sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was once tasked with being an investigator for Project Blue Book, which was the name used to describe a study of UFOs conducted by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to December 17, 1969, when the project was terminated. Okay, we talk about Project Blue Book a lot. You gotta know what it is. While his job was meant to be to investigate and essentially debunk UFO sightings, later in life he took to Congress to stand up and explain his own UFO encounter that he was never able to explain away. The moment that truly stuck with him all of these years took place back in 1952 when he was sent off to Newfoundland after there were reports of a UFO that had crashed off of the coast of St. John's. As he arrived to the scene, there were at least 100 people who all stood and stared into the water, and as he was able to follow their gaze and see what they were all looking at, he couldn't quite believe his eyes. He recalled the water being quite clear, and under it you could see 2 circular crafts, each one approximately 18 feet in diameter. He said that they were both floating just below the surface of the water, no more than 20 feet from the shore, and not only this, but he could also see 2 beings with the crafts. He said, quote, "The first thing I saw was the UFOs, and it was apparent to me that they were doing something to the craft, and I couldn't really tell what because they were on the bottom side of it and not visible to me except when they would occasionally get over to the side where I could see them." He claims he watched on as the beings worked on the craft until one of them raised out of the water and disappeared, but not before accelerating to speeds in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 miles per hour.
Number 5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser's spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom. On October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and dropped below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright-Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit the ground, and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now, the majority of these reports come from Northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now, if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio? Number 10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought like we're under attack by aliens." lights. It was scary. Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like limp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earliest photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival. As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sightings, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage Country in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and Second Deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spar and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spar began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer officer pulled into a gas station where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the Coyne-Mansfield helicopter incident. The Coyne-Mansfield helicopter UFO incident occurred on October 18, 1973, when 4 members of the Ohio Army National Guard were flying in a helicopter over Mansfield, Ohio. Suddenly, they encountered a large metallic disc-shaped object that was hovering in the sky. The object began to move towards the helicopter, causing the crew to take evasive maneuvers. Despite their efforts, the object continued to follow them, eventually passing overhead and disappearing into the distance. The crew reported the incident to their superiors, and an investigation was launched by the military and the Federal Aviation Administration. The incident received significant media attention, and it remains one of the most compelling UFO sightings on record. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the credibility of the witnesses. The crew were all experienced pilots with military training, and their account of the incident was corroborated by radar data and other witnesses on the ground. Despite extensive investigations, no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered for what they saw that day. In our number 4 spot today, we have Apollo 11. So we can sit here on Earth all day and talk about the potential for alien life and UFOs, but who would know more than the people who have actually been to space, which are of course astronauts. Definitely on the list of coolest and scariest jobs in the world, there haven't been a ton of people who have had the unbelievable privilege of experiencing space firsthand, but there are even less of them who have claimed to see something that seems completely unexplainable. People who have claimed these sorts of things include Edgar Mitchell, Catherine Coleman, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. The very interesting part about many of these claims is that they also include some sort of government cover-up as well with their claims. There was also Buzz Aldrin, who spoke about his Apollo 11 experience, and he detailed the crew seeing something flying alongside them, and at first they believed it was the final stage of a detached rocket, but then Mission Control confirmed that it was actually 6,000 miles away from them, leaving them with no answers on what the flying object could be. I can't imagine going to space at all, let alone encountering a UFO flying right beside you. Also, I can't believe that I hadn't heard of that story before, because to me, that sounds like full-blown alien contact. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Go Faster video. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. This video was the third in a series of 3 videos, and there weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter. Using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Delphos Ring incident. The Delphos Ring UFO incident occurred on November 2nd, 1971 in Delphos, Kansas, when a family witnessed a strange object hovering over their farm. The UFO emitted a bright light that illuminated the surrounding area and left a glowing ring in the ground after it disappeared. The family reported the incident to the local sheriff, who took a sample of the ring for analysis. Investigations were conducted by several experts, including the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, who collected soil samples and found that the ring was caused by the removal of topsoil, which had been exposed to a high amount of heat. Additionally, a high level of radiation was also detected at the site. The incident received widespread media coverage and sparked debates about the existence of extraterrestrial life and the possibility of alien visitation. Some skeptics argued that the incident could have been caused by natural phenomena or a hoax, but the witnesses maintained that they saw a genuine UFO. Despite the years of investigation, it's been no conclusive explanation for the incident has been found, leaving the mystery of the Delphos Ring UFO unsolved. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Shag Harbor incident. This incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting out on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing it. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy, he saw 4 blips on its Decca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board either. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. It was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for, so what could have all those witnesses seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents, it is listed as a UFO.